What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're not going to be looking at an apologist per se, but we are going to be looking at a young man who's decided to enter the fray of Christian apologetics. We're going to be watching Tyler debunk a dumb atheist argument and then also try to debunk evolution. So I'm very interested to see what he's got. I'm always excited to see a new face here on YouTube talking about religion. So if you heathens want to find out why evolution is bunk and what is the dumbest atheist argument, then please stay tuned.
Hello everyone and welcome back to it right now. Before we get into the main part of this video, I'm going to be bringing up a really interesting argument from a non-theist. So I saw a YouTube comment on a video. I don't remember what the video was titled. Basically, it said, well, Jesus didn't exist back then because the letter J didn't exist 2,000 years ago.
Okay, well, I do agree that this is a bad argument. I do believe that a Jesus could have existed back then, although his name would have been Yeshua because the J sound didn't exist at that particular point in time in that language, so it would have been Yeshua. But still, Yeshua, Joshua, Jesus, I mean, you're literally comparing apples to apples here and pulling ass hairs off of a fly. So I would say that that's a pretty bad argument to make if you're wanting to say that Jesus didn't exist in the first century. There are far better arguments that you can make that are just as simple as that. How about the fact that there's no independent eyewitness sources that actually placed Jesus on Earth? It's quick, to the point, and it covers a lot of stuff that you can then jump into to get a bit further into the topic. If you're just going to pull out one random wild card for why Jesus didn't exist, I would pick that one. But also, I wouldn't have that particular discussion either on a YouTube comment section or just with a general Christian that already believes that Jesus is a divine son of God. This is a very niche topic to get into, and unless your interlocutor is seeking that kind of conversation, all you're going to do is prevent them from listening to your arguments. So don't use the whole Jesus didn't exist thing when you're breaking the ice with a Christian or just in general throwing it out there as a wild card. I wouldn't do that. Save that kind of talk for the very niche conversations where Christians are looking for that kind of conversation. But let's see what Tyler's take is on this particular argument.
Only issue with that is, original Bible wasn't written in English. In fact, the English language wasn't even a thing back during Christ's time alive on this planet. So that's an argument that doesn't work.
Now, here's where I'm going to agree with Tyler. It is definitely a bad argument because the Bible, nor any of the supposed eyewitness accounts of Jesus or even Paul's letters were written in English. So bringing up some etymological argument from English is not going to convince anybody for one, and it's just wrong. And he is also correct that English was not a language in the first century. English actually didn't become a language until the 5th century. So good on him for bringing some good information to this conversation.
Even then, there's a lot of historical evidence for Christ's existence.
But is there? I don't think that there is. I mean, if you seriously consider the evidence that we have, the only independent account of Jesus that we have is Paul. And Paul doesn't record anything about Jesus' time on earth. Now, I know that there are some ambiguous statements in Paul that people could use to suggest that he was definitely talking about a historical person named Jesus. But there are very good reasons to doubt those particular passages. For one thing, them being ambiguous at all is an argument against the position that they prove that he existed in history. They shouldn't be ambiguous if Paul really knew that Jesus walked this earth. But considering that Paul thought that any information that he could have gotten from human origin would not be accepted by his community, and he had to resort to only getting his information from scripture and through visions of Jesus. It seems to me like he wouldn't reference anything about Jesus' time on earth, even if he had walked on this earth. Considering that this is the only independent account of Jesus that we have, I highly doubt that Jesus actually existed in history, but more to the point, we don't have any good evidence that he actually did walk this earth. So there's no reason to believe that he did.
So, I mean, if you want to believe that this letter argument works to disprove Christ, I guess you can do that. It's just not very logical.
Though you shouldn't use that argument to say that Jesus didn't exist in history. That is a really bad argument. So, don't use that argument.
And I know a lot of people will say, well, believing in God isn't logical, but even then there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the existence of God. I'm not going to get into it because you can literally Google search it, for crying out loud, if you want proof. Like,
did this guy literally just tell us to go and Google the evidence for God's existence? Apparently, the evidence for God is so good that a quick Google search will resolve the thousands of years of discussion over whether or not God exists. But still, it's not illogical to either doubt that God existed or believe that a specific version of God definitely doesn't exist, or to just not believe in a God at all. It's not illogical because there's no good evidence to suggest that a God exists. A simple Google search is only going to leave you confused. This takes a pretty long time for you to digest all of the different arguments and counter arguments, and just the entire conversation takes a long time to really feel around and figure out. We have a plethora of videos on this channel where we go through just about every single argument for God's existence. And we also show how those arguments do not prove that God exists. They fall short every single time. They either have logical errors in them or they perform leaps in logic in order to get to the conclusion that God exists. But don't just look at my channel. Look at all the different channels and all the different resources out there for analyzing whether or not a God exists, and then you come to your own conclusion.
There's a lot of historical proof for it. There's a lot of historical proof for Noah's Ark, etc. I'm not going to go into it. If you want to look it up, the internet is there.
So did this guy just sit down and he's like, I'm going to make a video on God and how dumb atheists are, and I'm going to mention evidence, but I'm not going to give any kind of evidence myself. I'm just going to tell them to do their own research. I feel like he should have fleshed out his idea for the video first and actually provided some evidence in support of his position. Like, he mentions historical evidence for Noah's Ark. Are you talking about those shitty fucking pictures that you can find on the internet of the supposed rock formations that look like a boat? Or how about the supposed chariots in the bottom of the sea for the crossing of the Red Sea, in Exodus? Is he talking about that kind of shit? Because if he is, he's about to have a bad time. None of those things prove the events that they're supposed to prove. I would love to know what historical evidence he has for God, although apparently we're not going to find out any of this evidence, at least not in this video. Maybe in a future video. We can only hope. Google it, bitch.
I'm not gonna force anything on anyone.
I doubt he can force anything on anybody through a YouTube video. I appreciate that he says that he's not going to try to force his beliefs on other people, but I really don't think he needed to say that.
I don't know how far I'm going to go into this atheist thing, because this channel is not meant to be one of those Christian channels who are going around talking about claims and arguments that atheists make, but I guess I could do that, and honestly, it would be a little bit interesting. Plus, it would give me more video ideas whenever I limited on the other part of the channel. Plus, I was going to integrate my Christian beliefs into this channel somehow, so I guess this is the way to do it.
I feel like we just witnessed somebody becoming an apologist. Yes, honey, that was a bit crazy, wasn't it? I have no idea why some Christians out there feel like they have to insert their beliefs and be very vocal and public and everything like that in everything that they do. Like, no matter what. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and start like a camping channel or something like that, and it's going to be me out in my backyard and being like, hey, all right, God don't exist, but here's how you put up a tent. I'm not going to, I don't know. I don't understand why you have to, insert that into every facet of your life. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't insert atheism into every facet of my life. I mean, it is a pretty big part of my life, but it's not all encompassing, and I really don't think that it should be for a Christian, but I mean, it's that's whoever's choice, I guess.
Now, I'm not very, okay, there's a better word for that. I am not exponentially, now that's a horrible way to use that word.
Yeah, I don't know what you're exponentially at, but I'm wondering where this is going.
Oh my goodness. I am not well adversed in the theory of evolution. I just know that the belief is...
I'm sorry. I was busy looking for where evolution came in this conversation. I have no idea why he's transitioned from atheism and religion to evolution. That makes no sense to me, but okay. Also, I feel like what he meant to say is that he's not well-versed, not adverse. Also, I'm not sure where the whole exponential thing came from, but he might have been trying to say expert. Again, I'm not an expert either. So I don't expect anybody to be an expert, but you can just generally know about evolution. I'm a little scared to venture forward with his explanation of evolution, but let's listen to what he's got.
Fish, single-celled organism turned into a fish. Then the fish decided one day it wanted to go on land and breathe air, and eventually that fish turned into an ape, which eventually turned into a man or a woman, and then here we are, supposedly millions, maybe billions of years later, living modern-day lives.
Oh, man. I feel like me beating my head into a brick wall for 5 minutes straight would have been less painful than hearing that explanation of evolution. Nothing that he said makes any kind of sense except the fact that he's not an expert. I totally agree with that. You've definitely proven that. But I feel like he's probably getting this whole notion from apologists who talk about evolution. Like Frank Turek. This sounds like a very Frank Turek type of explanation of evolution. Because Frank doesn't understand evolution. He dumbs down evolution and then misrepresents it so that he can convince his audience that it's ridiculous. And if this young man has been listening to Frank Turek instead of real scientists and or even just reading a biology textbook from like high school, he would understand that everything that he just said is wrong. But anyways, I digress. So the reason why this is wrong is because while we did start out as single-celled organisms, it's not that the single-celled organism became a fish just like a fucking Pokemon, because that's what he described was Pokemon evolution. It's like the single-celled organism gained enough XP and then it transformed into a fish. There's so many steps in between there, because you've got single-cell, then you got multicellular organisms, and then you've got just a plethora of different things that came way before fish evolved. Alright, so that gets us up to the fish. So now that we're at the fish, he claims that the fish just decides to go on land. He's not considering that there are environmental pressures that made fish, amphibious fish rather, decide to venture onto land in order to search out new food resources or new environments to live in. And then after that, different environmental pressures would have caused those organisms to change in a multitude of ways. And over billions of years, but not millions, billions of years, we finally get to the apes. And at that point, it's millions of years until we develop. So just trying to explain all the little holes in his idea here. But that is by far the absolute worst rendition of evolution that I've ever heard.
That's my understanding of what the main theory of evolution is. Now, if you think about it, it does sound far-fetched, but a lot of people believe in it. To me personally, a fish, I mean, I will agree on one thing. We do have gills in the womb before we're fully developed, but I could argue the reason why is because there's amniotic fluids, and obviously if we're surrounded by liquids, we can't breathe that because we don't have gills. So of course, our non-fully developed infant cells would need gills to survive in the womb. So I guess that's not really a counter argument, depending on how you look at it. It's just, I could kind of argue that maybe God gave us gills in the womb because, we're surrounded by amniotic fluids.
Amniotic. Oh my God. So, it's amniotic, not ambiotic fluid, for one. For two, while the structures for gills kind of form in humans, what they go on to form is like our chin and jaw and stuff. That's what those go on to form into. But they're never fully functioning gills. But the whole structures, forming first and whatnot on our necks is a remnant of evolution, because we do descend from ultimately fish, but they're not fully functioning gills. We don't use gills to breathe in the womb, okay? This is like some bad women's anatomy type shit right here. Because while they're not fully formed and they develop into other, parts of our bodies, those wouldn't be the way that we breathe. We don't actually use our lungs in the womb, because our lungs would be filled with fluid at that point. The way that we get oxygen and expel carbon dioxide would be through the mother's placenta. That is what delivers the oxygen to the baby's heart, which is then dispersed throughout the baby's body. Of course, that's much later in the pregnancy, calling it a baby. But earlier it's the fetus, obviously. But still, we don't breathe amniotic fluid. So I would argue that you can't use this argument for anything because it's just not reality. These are not facts. Do y'all recall earlier how he was telling us to go and Google the evidence for God? Maybe he needs to Google how gestation works.
You feel free to talk about this. Like I said, I'm not well adversed in the topic of evolution. I just know the basics. I don't have a college degree understanding of it or anything, and I don't really feel the need to understand it any more than I already do.
He doesn't think he needs to educate himself more on the topic of evolution because he has the basics down. No shit, you're not an expert. And no shit, you don't have a college degree in this particular field. Holy fuck. I feel like at this point, when somebody has obviously regurgitated something that is not reality, they have shown that they do not know or understand anything about the topics that they are talking about, and they acknowledge that they're not an expert or they don't have any kind of advanced knowledge of the topic that he's talking about, but then has the audacity to say, I don't feel like learning no more shit about these things. I feel like at that point, you're just kind of a lost cause. Because at that point, you're saying, hey, this is what I know, and I really don't give a shit if it's right or not, because that's all I'm ever going to know about it. At that point, the conversation's over. There's really no point in even continuing to try with that person, because they obviously don't want to learn correct information. They would rather stew in their ignorance.
Because I personally don't believe in evolution, and it's not because of ignorance. Like I said in my last video,
it is absolutely because of ignorance, my man. Yeah, it's definitely because of ignorance that he doesn't accept evolution He's obviously not willing to learn what evolution is or what the science says about how organisms change over time. He's obviously not wanting to update his bad information on a topic. So the way that he's described evolution will always be evolution to him. And it's definitely ignorant. That's being charitable.
Last year, I used to be an atheist. I used to believe in evolution, all of that. I used to believe the earth was maybe billions of years old. I used to believe that there was no God, etc., all of that. But then I've changed my mind after God has answered my prayers.
Oh shit! God has answered his prayers. He doesn't say, does he? Not like exactly which prayer God answered. I would love to know which prayer of his God answered, because from what I can tell, you can't discern just coincidence or happenstance from God answering a prayer. So I'm kind of interested as to what experience he had that convinced him that God exists. Also, I kind of feel compelled to call bullshit on him claiming to be an atheist in the past and believing in evolution and believing that the earth is millions of years old. I highly doubt it. Although, I mean, maybe I should give him the benefit of the doubt that he really was an atheist, that he really did accept the scientific consensus that evolution is a real thing that is still happening, accept the scientific evidence that the earth is billions of years old. For me, at least, there's no amount of experience out there that would convince me that a God exists. Because as far as my experience goes, the only conclusion that I could come to really would be that I don't know what happened. I don't know why this happened. It's a mystery to me, but I'm not gonna jump to God's existence as the answer for that question. It would take some scientific evidence or some evidence that would definitely convince me that God does exist. And while I don't know what that would look like, and I don't expect anybody on earth to be able to provide me with that, but I can tell you one thing, God, being the all-knowing son of a bitch that he is, he would know what would convince me. And the fact is that he has not done that yet. So he's chosen to allow me to remain an atheist. If he were to exist, that is. I don't find experiences like answered prayers or miracles or anything like that to be all that convincing, because I can't really know what happened. All I can come up with is, I don't know what happened. And if you're there, then you shouldn't jump to God.
And I've actually seen God answer a decent amount of prayers to know that there is a God, and I will actually go more in depth in that in a later video, not this one, because this video doesn't really warrant that, but I guess.
Whenever I hear somebody say this, that God has answered a lot of different prayers out there, I can't help but to wonder how they discern God answering a prayer from just shit happening. I don't know how you would actually discern that, other than putting it out there that, oh, you're praying in the name of Jesus and then something happened, right? What about all the times that God answers no to those prayers, or answers in the negative somehow? Like when children are praying to God to make the priest stop fucking them in the ass. Why doesn't God stop? Why does God answer no at those points? These are the kinds of difficult questions that Christians don't like to answer. Because if God is answering prayers out there, if God is having some kind of real effect in reality, then not only do you have to deal with the horrible shit that happens where people pray in the name of the Christian God, and yet the Christian God, if he were to exist, says, no, I'm going to allow this horrible thing to happen. Not only do you have to reconcile that with your faith, but also you have to reconcile with the fact that there's no empirical or scientific evidence to suggest that God is having an effect on this reality.
I could go more into the Christian side of things, I guess. I don't know, because I know dang well I'm going to be opening a whole can of worms if I do that. But you know what? I would actually be kind of interested to see how it goes. So you know what? I'm going to do it.
Well, heathens, that's going to be it for his video today. All in all, I was very unimpressed. I mean, great comedy there. But, I mean, the fact that he's so ignorant about all of the principles that he talked about, either the age of the earth or evolution or any of the things that he talked about, his insane ignorance of it, and then his willful admission that he doesn't want to learn the correct information. I mean, that just, that tells me all that I need to know. He doesn't want to understand shit. He doesn't want to update his outdated view of things. He doesn't want to look past Christian apologists for the explanations for all these things. Instead of having a conversation with a person like this, you might as well just beat your head on a brick wall for about 5 minutes. It'll cause about the same amount of brain damage. But anyways, let me know what you think down below in the comments, and hey, while you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of video. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens!